Started, I want to welcome you to Get Set Up special event, the Violet Protest, Harness the Power of Creation as a Tool for Public Protest with Ann Morton. My name is Wade. I'm one of the guides here at Get Set Up, and I'll be your host today. As a community of active older adults who are looking to stay informed and connected, Get Set Up is thrilled to have Ann with us today to lead us in a discussion on peaceful protesting. Before we get started, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. For those of you tuning in live through our Get Set Up Zoom class, please remember to mute yourself during the session, but do keep your cameras on if you're comfortable with that, so we can enjoy connecting with each other and so that we can capture some images to share in the future. If you have a question while Ann is speaking, please let us know by entering it into the chat. And for those of you joining via our community live streams on Get Set Up TV, Facebook, or YouTube, you're welcome to enter your questions into the comments. We'll do our best to make sure everyone's questions gets addressed. And now, on to our special guest. For 35 plus years, after 35 plus years in a professional career as an environmental graphic designer, Ann earned her Master of Fine Arts in 2012 from Arizona State University's Herberger Institute School of Art. Currently, she is a practicing artist and an instructor at Mesa Community College and previously at Arizona State University and Paradise Valley Community College. Her work has been recognized, published, and shown both nationally and internationally. Driven by a desire to make right, the work she does reflects her own handwork, but also orchestrates the handwork of a wide variety of community participants through public interventions that seek to harness the power in the act of making and to socially engage the hands of many to create a larger whole. The topics we're going to cover today will be learning how an idea can bloom across the country, understanding how protest or resistance can be positive and uplifting, and learning how to get involved. And welcome to Get Set Up, and take it away.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Honored to be speaking with you today. So I'm going to just get right into screen share and get started. All right, hope you all can see that okay. So this is the Violet Protest. These are the core values on which the Violet Protest operates and is founded on. And these are the core values that have really compelled lots of people to get involved in the Violet Protest. Our common goal is to send bundles of handmade textile squares, 8 by 8 inch squares, to every member of the 117th Congress. We want to do that as a demonstration to say that if we as citizens are willing to come together of all political persuasions, then we want our elected officials to do the same. So as of August 13th, which is the last time we've updated, we have 2,285 makers who have pledged to make 17,162 squares that I just mentioned. All 50 states are represented, the District of Columbia, and also 4 provinces. It looks like 5 provinces in Canada. I just want to give a shout out to Phoebe DeCook in Mantorville, Minnesota. She's been the one handling the database throughout the Violet Protest ever since it was launched. And she updates this map every week, which you can find on the progress page on the website. We'll talk more about this in a moment. So if you're a maker or you know a maker, we know that that tradition of American hands making both useful objects but also aesthetic objects has been there for centuries. We know about quilting bees and knitting circles, and it's been a chance for people to come together and talk about their community and their families and the concerns and the joys that they have. So now we're hoping that through our hands, we can make a physical symbol that it's a tangible expression of our diversity, but it's also an expression of our common hope for unity. So if you do go to the website, the funnest page to visit is the progress page. There you'll see a graphic of the letters US, meaning us, or of course, the acronym for the United States. And that has been our way of keeping track of where we are in the project. So under each stack in the grid of that, and I'm going to show you that in a moment, everyone that has contributed to that particular stack is listed. And then when their squares come in, they're photographed and posted up on the website. So you can scroll through thousands and thousands of squares that have been made to date on the progress page. So here's that graphic that I was talking about. Each stack is comprised of about 230 squares. Our original goal was to send 50 squares to every member of Congress. So this is mathematically works out that if we filled up this US, we would meet that goal. Right now, we're at around 25 to 30 squares, and we're happy with that. We are very excited with the response we've gotten, but this is a way that what you'll see on the website that shows you our progress. Another thing that's happened throughout the project is what we're calling the squares of the week. So each week when I get squares in, pardon me, I pick one that seems to be relevant to that moment in time, whether it's a holiday or something that happened. And given the fact that the project started in January of 2020, long before we knew what 2020 was going to bring, these squares have become this very interesting chronicle of events with everything that we've experienced during 2020. And so they're a visual chronicle, and even the post, the written post on Instagram and Facebook really gives us a really interesting history of the year we've endured. So there are some silver linings. I'm sure, hopefully all of you have been able to find a silver lining in this year. But one for this project and for me personally is the fact that I've been able to connect with people like you all over the country. I've met with over 30 groups nationwide, fiber groups, quilting guilds, weaving guilds, and these are groups that would not normally be online, but because of the pandemic and their desire to meet together, they've all learned how to use Zoom. And that's allowed me to drop in and speak with everyone. You can see how long my hair's gotten from the beginning to the end of this year that we've gone through. So once a person signs up through the website, they get a packet, which includes a sheet of instructions that you see here, and these violet colored tags that ultimately are attached to each and every square. So every square that goes to Congress has someone's name and their city and state attached. If I average out over this course of about 20 months that the project has been happening, I've sent out about 30 to 34 packets a week. Because when I say that there's about 2,200 makers, those are different makers, but some makers have signed up 3, 4, 5 times. So they may have gotten several packets over the course of the project. So because of the pandemic, one interesting thing that happened is that not knowing what was safe, I quarantined packages for 2 weeks all year long. So I would date the package when it came in and date it as to when I would open it. And you can see the buildup of packages that has come in. This particular image was before February 1st, which was a big deadline before the exhibition, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. So during the time that the squares were coming in, this is how they were stored. Each one of these vertical bags represents those stacks that I talked about in that US graphic. So they were kept in their respective stacks and counted and marked off every time I received squares. So getting into the exhibition, one other piece that I'm working on during this exhibition is called the voluntary protective action. And I think that those words really speak to the broader purpose of what we're trying to do with the violet protest. So this piece, you can see me working on it here right in the gallery. It consists of 3 flags. There's a flag with a red sweater and a flag with a blue sweater. And all during the course of the exhibition, I've been working on this red and blue sweater, which I'm very much hoping to finish and install on the 3rd flag before the end of the exhibition. It's just really a physical demonstration of the extraordinary amount of handwork that this project represents. And it's been a way for me to be in the gallery and meet people that come through to see the exhibition. So here we are seeing some of the installation shots. There are 86 of these strips, 86 or 87, that have about 22 squares each. And they represent the promise that if the makers got their squares in by February 1st, they were promised at least 1 square on the wall. And so there's 2 huge walls in the gallery that are covered with the violet protest squares. And the balance of those squares are in these US stacks, which you can see in this picture is partially made. And I'll show you that complete in just a moment. So here we see the finished exhibition, the walls and the US stacks. You can see looking down on the right here, or I'm sorry, on the left, all those tags that are coming off of those squares. And so all those tags are readable to visitors. They can see names and places and see how many people are represented by this project. Just a few more close-ups of what those walls look like. We also have the squares of the week, the first 40 squares of the week up on the wall. There are 28 more squares of the week that have continued to be selected. But those first 40 really represent that core of the year of 2020. They start in April of 2020 and they run all the way through February of 2021. And each one represents another story, another experience that we had during that year. And here's an aerial view of those US stacks. So you can see, and what has happened during the course of the exhibition is that these stacks have grown. So what you're seeing here really no longer looks like this because they're probably about 3 to 6 inches taller, depending on where the stack, which stack we're talking about. But they're quite a bit taller now than they were when we first installed. We've had some special visits at the Violet Protest. We had Congressman Greg Stanton visit us. We had the mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego, who proclaimed April 13th, 2021 Violet Protest Day in the city of Phoenix. And that was really a lot of fun. And we continue to reach out to lawmakers, to their staff. We're planning to be a part of an event at ASU's school that is in Washington, D.C., and we're hoping that we can create enough buzz so that when these squares arrive in Washington, they arrive with a level of awareness so that people know what they are and are expecting them. Another thing that's happened that was unexpected, but people were so happy and excited about the exhibition that they would stop into the museum store and say, hey, is there anything I can buy for the Violet protest? So we did a line of note cards, these lapel pins that you see, and the postcards that kind of document the installation at the museum. And these are available online through the Violet Protest website as well. So I just want to give you a few up and close and personal examples of Violet protesters' work, because sometimes the photographs from a distance really don't do the work justice. This is from San Mateo, California, Priscilla Azcuta. And another representation of different hands coming together by Tawny Clark in Tempe, Arizona. These running hairs by Callie Floor from San Francisco, California. She's a costume designer there and joined the protest. This is Valerie Titan, Olympia, Washington. This is actually a portrait of her cat who she sent a photo of too. So I got to see the real cat behind this square. This is from Billings, Montana, Brooke Atherton. This is part of a group that got together in Montana and actually made 50 squares together. They had an exhibition there in Red Lodge, Montana. And then once that exhibition was done, they packed them up and sent them off to me here at the Violet Protest. Nancy Nakamoto from Torrance, California, just a beautiful abstract landscape with silk organza and beadwork, hand dyeing. And Duarte Weaver. This is made from the bags from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So two publications that often have differing views coming together. I love the way this interlocked in the middle. And this is another form of interlocking. I think the form of textiles has so many wonderful metaphors to the message that we're trying to send. The threads, the structure of the cloth really relies on the interaction between the red and blue threads, whether it's woven or embroidered or knitted. Those strands depend on each other to hold together as a piece of cloth. We have lots of houses, themed squares. This is just one by Janet White in Redmond, Oregon. This particular square comes from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and it was one of the first squares somebody sent me a picture of, and she said, "This is my first square. Is it okay? Is it all right?" And it was so fun, and so just was a preview of what was to come. I think she sent this to me way back in February just to show me what she had made. So I've always loved this square, because it was kind of that first inkling of the wonderful squares I was going to get to experience all year. This is a beautiful hand-woven square by Sally Ogren in New Jersey. She is the editor of the Handweavers Guild of America magazine, and so she submitted a set of beautiful hand-woven squares, this just being one of them. This is another woven square by Linda Shin in Wilmington, Delaware. She used rya knots, old denim, plastic bags, so a whole different way of using weaving as a medium to get a different look to her square. This is another one from that group in Montana, using cyanotype and applique. It's just kind of a celestial looking square, lots of fun. And we have some fellas that have joined the protest, probably I would say 25 to 30. And this is one particular square that was just beautiful, that came in from Steve Lawler at Northfield, Minnesota. Northfield Yarn actually got a whole group of people together and made squares through their yarn shop. And this is one of that group. We've gotten lots of squares that are depicting the US Capitol. This is one from Haristi Wilbur right here in Glendale, Arizona. And another from Tara Ritako in Carlsbad, California. This one is really beautiful, hand-dyed fabric, applique, and lots and lots of stitched embellishment. This weaver actually sent me a letter. She's a retired magistrate judge, and she said that for her retirement, instead of a gold watch, her colleagues got together and got her a floor loom. So she's taken up weaving, and this is one of the squares that she made. And again, that interdependence between the warp and the weft, the red and the blue, to create a finished fabric. Dawn Schwame from Boyne City, Michigan. Beautiful kind of stitch work, kind of like a cantha cloth running stitch. Beautiful color palette, and just an abstract design that she made. Several of these that have similar feel to them, but just really love the hand stitching on her squares. This was a seed packet from Woolrich, Maine. And she cut apart the bird seed package and put it back together to make this really wonderful square for the violet protest. And this is Savannah K. Gordon, another bird. And she has a number of squares in the project, but just some beautiful machine and hand embroidery here on this applique square. This is Wendy Resinen right here in Phoenix. And if you read this carefully, you'll see the word help. And just thought it was a fun, abstract, beautifully quilted piece that she made. And this is Tawny Clark again. I happened to open this square on the anniversary of women's suffrage. So this has happened a lot, where there's lots of serendipity in what's happening and the squares that I open and how they relate to each other. This particular square has the wonderful story. This woman wrote to me that she found out about the project the day after her mother's funeral from losing her to COVID-19. And she just found it a way to work through her grief. She made several beautifully appliqued and hand-stitched squares and was kind enough to let me share her story. And we have lots of heart renditions in the project. And here's just another one from Kelly Waterman, Blue Ash, Ohio. Lots of flowers. This is Kitty Spangler from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kitty jumped in right away and has been making squares throughout the project. I think she's nearly up to about 150 squares. And she's using it as a way to experiment. With the 8x8 square, you don't have to commit too much. You can do something you've been thinking about or want to try just in the space of that 8x8 square. And Kitty has definitely taken advantage of that. Another floral design on an old pair of jeans by Patty Montgomery, Carlsbad, California. And of course, we know that we lived through COVID, the ups and downs we've all experienced, however close it came to our families. And this, Angela Myers sent me a picture of her in her PPE garb, and she made this square out of PPE materials, except for the heart in the middle, of course, but it was just a wonderful square that she made and submitted. And then Nancy Nakamoto again. This square has proven to be very popular. It's one of the squares of the week. This is a working mask But she's done this beautiful woolen quilted piece that's kind of warm and cozy, embroidered a face on it and made this mask to fit the square. So I'm just going to go over some stats with you because there's lots of numbers floating around in this project. But as I told you, as of the 13th of August, we're up to over almost 2,300 makers, about 2,200 makers, over 17,000 squares, which means that we're up to about 32 squares for each and every member of Congress. At one point in the project, I sent out an inquiry to makers to let me know how long they were spending on their squares. So I averaged probably about 150 responses and got about 4.41 hours per square as an average. And so that means that with the commitments we have, it represents over 75,000 hours of hand labor that this project represents. The exhibit at Phoenix Art Museum opened with about 9,500 squares. Right now, we have over 12,000 squares in the gallery. So that's how many I've added since the beginning of the exhibition. And there's still time to be a part of this project. So we've extended a special deadline for GetSetup participants. If you go to the just violetprotest.com and go to the volunteer tab, you can volunteer to make squares. You'll be routed to Sign Up Genius. You sign up for however many you want to make, 1, 5, 10. And then I send you those tags that I showed you earlier. And you can actually be a part of this project. I just quickly want to share with you some other projects I've done. It might answer some questions. This is a project I did in 2013. Similarly, I put a call out to makers to make blankets, each blanket having 28 squares, and those squares became pixels in this huge image of desert flowers. And once these blankets were installed, they were then given to agencies serving people experiencing homelessness in Phoenix and all over Arizona, actually. We had install day where makers and their husbands and their friends came and laid out the blankets in order. This happened at Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. The project was called What Happened Today. People from all over Houston filled out these little notes that were published in the Houston Chronicle that where they answered the question, what happened today? So we had all these wonderful events, large and small, that happened to people that were made, then sewn into this big quilted piece and juxtaposed with these kind of hand, almost like a hooked rug piece of the Houston Chronicle cut into strips. So we took the news that was worthy of print and made it unreadable. We took the news that was important to individuals and made it totally visible in this project. This was a project where I was hired to be the artist in residence at the dump. So that was my job. But what I was compelled by was the people that, mostly women, that stood all day long and sorted through our recyclable trash. So I thought that what I wanted to do was a project that would acknowledge them and the work that they do. So I put a call out to makers once again to make flowers out of their own recyclable trash, cardboard, plastics, aluminum, and put a thank you note on those flowers. So they were put together in this huge installation of 3,100 flowers. And then once that was done, we took them apart, went back to the dump, and gave the workers a flower to say thank you in person. And so with that, I'm going to come back to you. I'll turn off my screen share here. Here I am. So I'm ready for questions.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Anne. We certainly appreciate that overview. I have a few questions for Anne. And for those of you out there, we've had a few questions come in already on the chat. Go ahead and enter your questions on the chat as well. But to start with, can you tell us a little more about the story behind what brought you to this point in your career? After 35 plus years as an environmental graphics designer, what made you decide to go back to school in 2012 to earn your MFA?
Well, I had the opportunity. I started taking some classes. I was a little bit dissatisfied with how I was spending my creative capital. I think 9/11 actually had a lot to do with that dis-ease. So it took a while, but through that class, I went to South Africa. I started to see how other people live in the world, and coming back and designing another monument sign, it just didn't seem to fulfill the heart of what I wanted to do. So that's what really drove me to go back to school. And I just had a sense that through art, that could become a tool for advocacy. And so that's really what drove me to make that change of life.
Okay, interesting. Can you remember and describe the moment when you first thought of the concept for the violet protest?
Well, I don't know about the one moment, but I have been uncomfortable with the divisions that have grown in our country. It feels to me as though it's becoming harder and harder for Congress to actually govern. And so even back in 2017 and even before that, but in 2017, I kind of wrote a manifesto about a public project that could center around this idea of going back to values, rather than thinking about any political issue or social problem specifically, to ask our lawmakers to really reconnect with the values that they teach their children, that we've taught our children. And so with this opportunity at the Phoenix Art Museum, the timing seemed to come together. I've taught color for years, and I know that violet lies between red and blue on the color wheel. And I love the word violet because it's one letter away from the word violent. And so it's just, it all kind of came together after many years of thought about, and really just concern about the future of our country.
Okay, great. So at the beginning of what's now a nationwide public engagement project, how were you able to spread the word about the violet protest? And was it challenging to reach such a large audience that you finally reached?
Yes. Well, I showed you those other projects that I did. And through those projects, I gathered some good mailing lists. So I started there. And then I did research on fiber groups across the country. Anyone that does that kind of work realizes how well connected the fiber makers community is across the world, really, but certainly across the United States. So once I started making those connections, someone in Wisconsin had a sister in Iowa who knew someone in Florida that had a cousin in Texas. And it's all been word of mouth since then, because I've just found that this is just an extraordinarily generous community of people that are ready, willing, and able to step up and express themselves through making with textiles.
Yeah, the fact that it did spread so much by word of mouth like that, I think shows that you hit a nerve that everyone relates to. So
yes, that's been heartening for sure.
So it's probably difficult to choose, but do you have a favorite moment that sticks out in your mind in terms of the journey so far?
Wow. That a favorite moment. I thought you're going to ask me about my favorite square. That's what everybody does. Um, I think I don't know if it would be my favorite moment, but I think what I can remember is the reaction to the violet protests. You know, it's one thing to talk about it and work on it, but once it was put up for exhibit, I did not even realize how it would touch people that came to see it. As I mentioned before, I've been in the gallery twice a week for a few hours knitting, and I've seen people come in, um, break into tears, come up to me and say, "This, I'm just, I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless." And they're just the reaction of people has really validated my concerns and makes me have a lot of faith. If you can imagine that room, go back to the slide that I showed with that room of squares. That was my pandemic experience, opening thousands and thousands of textiles all over the country from people. And so it's just been extraordinary during this moment in time that this happened to happen, because it certainly wasn't planned that way.
Okay, well, you set yourself up for the next question. What is your favorite square?
Okay. Well, you know, I guess I could point to the squares of the week, because obviously they were chosen because they had a certain quality level, but also spoke to a particular moment in time. But I will tell you, there's just so many amazing squares. You just can't believe how much time people have put into it. But there is one square of the week that's very beautiful. It's kind of half red and half blue. There's some floral designs embroidered, starting with red and blue, and then when they come to the middle, she mixes the threads, so it mixes red and blue. I chose that one because it was so beautifully done. But one of the other squares she sent in said, and this go back in time, this was right before the election. She said, "I'm 85 and I vote." That's what she sewed on her square. So I just love that spirit and the quality and detail that this woman had in her square. So it's just one story of thousands, but that does come to mind.
All right. And I have some additional questions, but I'd like to make sure we cover questions from the audience. So again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. And if you'd like to go ahead and speak out loud and ask your question to Anne, just raise your hand via Zoom and we'll unmute you and call on you so you can ask your question. But I do have one question from the chat. When the squares are delivered, will there be a recommendation for a local maker willing to sew them together to form a quilt?
That's a really good question. I think that we would like to do that. We're going to have, of course, materials in there that explain the project, explain what's happened. We've also put a call out to makers to write their own letters to Congress. So we're hoping to have a collection of letters from makers. But we also might have a list of things they could do with the squares. And with that list, possibly a list of makers that would be willing to be contacted to put the squares together for the lawmakers. So yes, that has definitely been considered. And we'll have to reach out to makers and get volunteers for that, but we would like to do that.
A somewhat related question. So your overall project goal is in sending these squares to members of Congress is to voice hopes and support for cooperation between lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. What type of reaction do you expect to get from these members?
It's really going to be hard to predict. We're still working on trying to connect with lawmakers, especially, you know, from our delegation here in Arizona, but also beyond. I guess what we hope, we know that this is not everything, but we also know that it's something. And I guess it's unique enough that we hope that it just might be that thing that changes an idea. Maybe they go into a meeting with a more open heart, open mind. We're seeing some of the log jams starting to break in Congress, and perhaps this might be something that reminds that, textiles have a way of evoking memories. We all have, they're so ubiquitous, but so foundational to the human experience. We wear textiles, we cover ourselves up, we keep warm with them. And so they tend to evoke memories that maybe other things don't. So while it's hard to predict what we'll do, we hope that we get some letters back, some selfies. We hope that we can actually hand off some of the bundles face to face. We're working on making that happen. So, but the majority of the bundles will be sent via US mail, and that's another statement that we're trying to make as well by using the US Postal Service. But we do hope that we will have a few meetings face to face with lawmakers that we can get some immediate reaction.
So how did you come up with the 8 core values of the Violet protest?
Well, it's no, there's no big formula. I wrote down what, and at first they were all C words, the core values. We had civility in that group, and we got a little bit of pushback on that word. So we changed, it was civility and respect. So we just took civility out of there and left respect for the other in the core values. So I ran the core values past a lot of people that I know, people that I trust, colleagues, writers, people that I value their judgment. And so it really was just a little bit of a group effort to put those together and making them as universal as possible.
So you mentioned that the violent protest focuses more on core values that you're just talking about than specific political or social issues. Did you ever consider spotlighting any specific issue, or has it always been the plan to just keep a very broad outlook?
It's really been the plan to actually, what I see is going back before any political issue is considered and reconnect with values, because we don't want to become the climate change project or the healthcare project or the gun control project. There's so many issues that we deal with and have to deal with. We really wanted, whatever the issue is that lawmakers are trying to move forward on, that they reconnect with the values that they say that they believe in, that we believe in, that we want them to remember when they're making their decisions.
Yeah, great answer. Cheryl, in fact, you have a question?
It's not a question, but it's a thank you to Anne. I've been involved with this project from almost the beginning, and through some emails, Anne and I have talked, but this is the first time I've actually gotten to see you. I was going to say in person, but it's by Zoom. And when I contacted Anne to ask her if she does any public speaking, I was surprised when she said, yes, she has, a talk that she does. And I was really delighted. And I'm just so happy that you came. I love this.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And that actually, Wade, does lead me to a question. Will this recording become available to people who, I know that we can request if we've attended, but if I want to spread this wonderful experience to the people that I know, especially makers. I quilt, but I know a lot of makers who do other things. Will it be available?
I'm going to defer that to Allie. Do you know the answer to that, Allie?
We will be setting up replay classes. There's going to be 4 replays on GSU TV. So Cheryl, I can send you the schedule for when we plan to do that. I would have to double check with Megan on if we're able to share the recording.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right. Anything else, Cheryl?
I'm just sitting here feeling so happy that we got to meet Anne. And I mean, I've read the literature that she sent to me and I've read the website, but this was just so much better to, to meet Anne and to hear about it.
Well, thank you,
Great.
Cheryl. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Cheryl. Appreciate it. Got another question, a little slightly different turn, but says there are so many different techniques that can be used to create these textile squares. Do you have a favorite technique or combination of techniques?
Well, in my own practice, I use lots of techniques, and it really kind of depends for me on the concept or the idea that I'm trying to get across. So, for instance, I'm knitting these sweaters for flags because we make sweaters and blankets for people we care about, want to keep warm and protect. So knitting a sweater seems to get that idea across. But I do a lot of embroidery in my own practice, so I'm drawn to squares that are embroidered. But the quilted squares are, they're just amazing. I'm a textile artist, so any textile form is wonderful to me. And it isn't just because, I love fabric. Textiles has such a deep, rich history and connection to the human story that for me, it's the only medium that I can express myself with. And so, especially a project like this, I think it goes beyond making a blanket. At the beginning of the project, makers would say to me, well, what are they going to be used for? What are they, because makers are used to making something usable. I said, we are making this for a purpose. It might not be a blanket. It might not be a pot holder. It might not be a scarf, but it is being used for a purpose, and that is to spread an important message. So these are functional, but functional in a different way.
And just a personal comment, my mother and my grandmother both were constantly knitting and crocheting and doing needlepoint. And I know if they were still here, they would have loved to be a part of this. I wish they could have participated. They would have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Another question, once the violent protest ends, what can we expect to see from you next?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think I need to take a few years off. But I'll just keep thinking of work that I think is important to make. As far as a public project like this, for me, all the pieces and parts, all the working parts kind of need to fall into line. Where it's going to be, who's commissioning it, how can it become something more than just my own expression? How can it be something that people take ownership of? So all those factors have to kind of fall in line before I engage in a big public project. So in the meantime, I'll make my own work, but it's usually along the lines of social commentary for sure.
Okay, well, we all look forward to that. One other question from the group is, how did you decide which squares to make into note cards?
Yeah, that was hard. That was really hard. So I picked out some that I thought the public would respond to, but I didn't trust my own judgment. So I ran it past, gosh, an audience of probably about 30 different people, I think, from retailers to, again, trusted colleagues, kids, older people, to see what would resonate with them, and kind of took a tally, because I actually selected 12 images and culled it down to these 6. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our time together, so it is time to start wrapping things up. And I certainly want to thank you, Ann. It's been great having you here today to teach us about how protests can be positive and uplifting.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and so if you want to learn more about Ann and her work, you can go to her personal website and the Violet Protest website. And you can also connect with her on Facebook and Instagram to see regular updates on the project. And also, if you want to get more involved, check out Reverly, a free website for knitters, crocheters, and fiber artists. And you'll see all these links now in the chat, and they'll also going to be included in the follow-up email for this event. I want to thank our audience members here in the front row class and in our mainstream communities. If you'd like a recording of this event, please email our support team at help@getsetup.io. If you're new to Get Set Up, we hope you've gotten a taste for what we do. We have over 500 online classes weekly, all designed for older adults and taught by older adults. The classes are all free because we work with local governments, communities, and Medicare organizations who support their members with free classes. I do want to draw attention to some relevant classes on Get Set Up. If you like this event, one of those classes might be of interest as well. Look for the sign-up link in the chat here on Zoom, in our live streams, and at www.getsetup.org. And remember, everyone who registered for this event will receive an email after the event with follow-up links and notes, including links to some relevant classes and other exciting upcoming guest speakers as well. We do look forward to seeing you in a future class, and want to thank you all for attending and hope everyone has a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.